Is that a rule book I see in your hand? Don't you dare read that thing. The last thing we need is for you to be exercising your brain and gaining knowledge like that. Just take that rule book, rip it to shreds, and blissfully allow me to share my knowledge of the rule book with you. I'm Ryan from How I Roll, and in this Rip Up the Rules, I'm going to teach you how to set up and play Euphoria Essential Edition so you can enter this dystopian world where knowledge is highly frowned upon. However, what isn't frowned upon is subscribing to this channel so you can catch more Rip Up the Rules, reviews, and all other kinds of board game content. So please go ahead and quickly hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Euphoria Essential Edition is a brand new re-implementation and updated version of Euphoria Build a Better Dystopia, which came out in 2013. It's designed by Jamey Stegmaier, David Studley, and Morten Monrad Pedersen and published by Stonemaier Games, who helped sponsor this video. It's a competitive worker placement game for 1 to 6 players, and it takes about 60 minutes or so to play. So come grab a seat at the table and let's learn how to play this game together. Ever wondered what it might be like to live inside the Hunger Games, Maze Runner, or the Allegiance series? Euphoria plunges you into a society you once thought was a utopia. Then you learn the truth. Now you've stayed to make your mark, recruiting workers, forging allegiances with factions, constructing markets that restrict everyone else's freedoms, digging tunnels, and collecting rare artifacts from the old world. Your goal is to place at least 9 of your authority tokens first. The more you push your workers, the more they learn about the dystopia, and the more likely they are to run away. Think you've got what it takes to balance knowledge, morale, and power in order to claim more authority than your opponents? Let's find out. Here's how you set up the game. Place the main board in the center of the table. Cover the exclusive action space at the end of the 3 tunnels using these unavailable action markers. Shuffle the deck of artifact cards and place it face down on the board. Reveal 4 cards to fill the 4 spaces of the Bazaar. Place a progress token on the start position of each of the 4 allegiance tracks and put a minor meeple on each of the 3 tunnels on the space that represents your player count for the game. Since I'm setting up for a 3-player game, I'll place them here. Shuffle all of the market tiles and place 1 face down on each of the 6 construction sites on the board, leaving the words construction site and the resources listed below it visible. Remove the rest of the market tiles from the game. Place the 3 resources, gold, stone, and clay, in a supply near the board, and also add the 4 commodities, energy, water, food, and bliss to the supply as well. Give each player a player mat of the color of their choosing as well as a reference card. Now each player receives the following in their chosen color: 2 worker dice, leaving the remaining 2 near the main board in a general supply, a heart-shaped morale token which is placed on the 1 space of their morale track, a face-shaped knowledge token which is placed on the 3 space of their knowledge track, 10 star-shaped authority tokens, 9 of which they place in the upper left of their player mat, and 1 is placed off to the right of their player mat. Finally, shuffle the recruit cards and deal 4 to each player. Each player now chooses 2 of these to keep and 2 to discard. Of the 2 that you keep, you place 1 of these face up in front of you and it is your active recruit. The other one you keep face down is a hidden recruit which will take effect later. Choosing these recruits will make more sense later, but for now, one thing you should know is that you should never choose one of these factionless recruits, signified by a black background behind their name, as your hidden recruit, because if you do, it will never come into play and that won't feel very euphoric at all. With all of that done, the game is set up and you're ready to play. Each player now rolls their 2 workers, aka these dice, to set the value of their starting 2 workers. The player with the highest total showing on their starting workers is the starting player and will go first. If there's a tie, the older player goes first. Kind of an awkward tiebreaker if you're playing with twins. Euphoria is a worker placement game where your dice are your workers. Beginning with the starting player and going clockwise around the table, players will take turns placing and retrieving workers and managing resources, all in a race to get out as many star-shaped authority tokens as possible. The game continues like this until 1 player has placed 9 of those stars, at which point the game end is triggered. At the end of the game, the winner will be the player who has placed the most authority tokens. On your turn, you simply take 1 of 2 options. You either place an available worker in your supply on the board, or you retrieve any of your workers from the board. I'll break down how these 2 actions work and all the effects on the board, but first I want to cover some core concepts of the game that will help all of that go very smoothly. First off, when placing workers and taking any actions, anything shown in a gray square like this is the cost of the action, while anything shown in one of these little white circles is the benefit of that action. The next thing I want to explain is that when placing one of your worker dice, there are 3 kinds of placement spots. First off, these large gray rectangle spaces are multi-use spaces that any number of workers can be in. It's basically a dice party that everyone's invited to. These small gray squares with a solid border are one-time use spaces and can only fit 1 die. So if there's a die there, it's blocked. Way less of a party than the big spaces. And lastly, these squares with dotted borders are temporary spaces and also only fit 1 die, but anyone can still go there and bumps the other worker back to its owner, even if it's their own worker. Over here on your player board, you have your morale track and your knowledge track, which track, well, morale and knowledge, of course. Your morale dictates the maximum number of these artifact cards you can ever have in your hand at once. If you ever draw a card that puts you above the morale limit, you must immediately discard a card. Similarly, if your morale ever drops and you have too many cards, you have to ditch your excess cards. Your knowledge dictates how likely some of your workers are to become aware of the dystopian nightmare they've been blind to and eventually run away. Anytime a worker becomes available to you, you must roll that worker and do a knowledge check which looks at all of your available workers. There are 4 ways that workers will become available to you. Whenever you retrieve dice from the board, anytime you create a new worker, when your worker is bumped off of a temporary action space, and when a construction site that has any of your dice is completed. Regardless of how this happens, you immediately take all of the dice being added to your supply, roll them, and add them to your available worker pool. Then you do a knowledge check by adding up the total knowledge or value of all of your available workers and add it to your current level on the knowledge track. If the total of this is less than 16, then you're safe and your workers stay blissfully ignorant. However, if the total is 16 or higher, as depicted on the right-hand side of the knowledge track, one of your workers becomes too smart and runs away. Take your highest valued die and place it in the runaway workers box. You only ever lose 1 die like this, even if your total would still be 16 or higher, or if your highest valued die is tied with another. And the final core concept I want to share is the 4 factions in this game and their allegiance tracks. The board is divided into sections that represent the 4 factions at play. These are the Icarites, the Euphorians, the Wastelanders, and the Subterrans. Each faction has an allegiance track that players will collectively be increasing throughout the game. Anytime you gain a benefit that shows that faction symbol like this, simply move the allegiance marker 1 space forward on that track. Doing so will unlock ongoing bonuses for any players that have an active worker in that faction. I'll loop back to these benefits in just a bit. With those key concepts in mind, let's break down how a turn works. Remember, I said you can take one of 2 actions on your turn: place a worker or retrieve your workers from the board. So here's how you place a worker. Take an available worker from your player mat and place it on any available action space on the board. Make sure you first pay the cost if there's one showing in a gray square, and then you gain the benefit. Simple. Now 2 quick notes. If it was a temporary space that already had a die there, the owner of that die immediately takes it, rolls it, places it in their available workspace, and performs a knowledge check. Also, you're usually only allowed to place 1 die on a turn. However, if you begin your turn with multiple workers with the same number showing, after you've placed a die and fully resolved its action, you can repeat this process with any number of the matching dice 1 die at a time, but it comes with a cost. For each extra die you place, you must first pay 1 morale to place it. If you're at the bottom of the morale track, you're broke and you can't afford to do this. Now that we know how to place a worker, let's explore the various actions around the board. All 4 factions have a commodity area where you can gain the commodity that they specialize in. All 4 of these work exactly the same. Remember that this action space is a multi-use space that can hold any number of dice. When you place a worker there, you add up the collective knowledge or total value of all the dice there and gain the benefits depicted on the chart based on that value. So, if the value is 1 to 4, you gain that faction's commodity and you increase its allegiance track by 1 space. If the total is between 5 and 8, you get 1 commodity and lose 1 knowledge. And with a value of 9 or greater, you get 2 commodities and 1 knowledge. And even if you can't lose or gain the depicted knowledge of tier 2 or 3, you can still take this action and simply gain the commodities. So, for example, if I place this 3 value worker here, it would bring the total of all 3 of these dice up to 7, placing me in this middle tier. So I would get 1 food and decrease the knowledge tracker on my player map by 1. The 3 lower factions are all trying to build tunnels, which all players can collectively contribute to by visiting these action spaces. Again, all of these work the same, but just have varying costs and rewards. To take this action, you pay the cost, gain the rewards listed, and move the miner 1 space forward. For example, I could pay 1 energy to place a die here, which would bump this worker back to its owner. This moves the miner 1 space forward and gives me 1 gold, or I can draw an artifact card from the Bazaar. Let's take a quick pause and look at the Bazaar. Anytime you gain an artifact card, you choose one of the 4 face-up cards and add it to your hand. If it has a cost above it, you have to pay it. This symbol just means any one commodity, so taking this card is free. Each of these cost any one commodity, and taking this card costs 2 commodities of your choice. Every time you draw a card, immediately refill the supply by shifting cards to the right to fill in any spaces and adding a new card from the deck to this spot here. If the deck ever runs out, simply shuffle the discard pile to form a new deck. And that's how you gain artifact cards in this game. Let's head back to the mining track for 2 more quick things. First off, as soon as a miner enters this space, any players who have a hidden recruit from that faction immediately flips it over and puts it into play. For example, if the miner advanced into this space, I could flip over my hidden recruit since it's from the matching faction Euphoria, and I would now have Katie the Dietitian in play, who gives me an ongoing benefit whenever I visit the generator. And she might even help me lose a few pounds along the way as well. Besides triggering new recruits, when a miner arrives at the final space of their track, they've completed their tunnel and you immediately remove this unavailable action space marker, and this new action space is now available to be used for the rest of the game. But there's a catch. There's always a catch. Only players who have an active recruit in that faction can use that action space. Otherwise, it's kind of like trying to get into Costco without a membership. Not happening. All 3 of these exclusive actions work the same. You place a die with no cost and gain 3 of the listed commodity. So, since I have good old Katie the Dietitian as one of my recruits, I can use this action to place a worker here and snag 3 water. Also, an important note about the tunnel is that even though it's complete, players can still use the basic tunnel action. It just won't move the miner any further. These 3 bottom factions also have a space to increase your workforce. At the Subterran Worker Activation tank, you pay 3 water, place a worker, and you immediately gain a worker from the general supply, roll it, and add it to your available workers, making sure to do a knowledge check. You also gain 2 morale and increase the Subterra Allegiance track by 1. The Euphorian Worker Activation tank works exactly the same, except rather than gaining 2 morale, you lose 2 knowledge, and you of course increase the Euphoria Allegiance instead. Instead of a worker activation tank, the Wastelands is home to the almighty Lost and Found. Remember how when you lose a worker in a knowledge check, it goes to this runaway worker space? Well, the Lost and Found action is your opportunity to track down those runaways and drag them back to your workforce. Simply pay 1 food, place a worker, gain 1 of your runaways, rolling and adding it to your available workers and doing a knowledge check, and also gain 1 knowledge, lose a morale, and increase the Wasteland's allegiance. There's still a couple actions left in these bottom 3 factions, but I think the Icarus faction is feeling a bit neglected, so let me quickly run you through their actions. They're a bit unique as their actions are all about trading, but the actions are pretty straightforward, so let's blast through it. First up is the Breeze Bar. You'll notice that this wild commodity icon only has 3 colors and no green. That just means that this cost can be any commodity besides Bliss. So to go here, you pay 1 Bliss and 1 of any other commodity. In return, you advance their allegiance by 1 and gain 2 artifact cards. The cost at the Sky Lounge is the same, but instead you get any 2 resources of your choice and still increase the allegiance track. At the Nimbus Loft, you pay any 3 resources to increase the allegiance as usual, and you also get to place 1 of your star-shaped authority tokens here. Remember that the main goal in this game is getting 9 or 10 of your authority tokens out onto the board. So including the Nimbus Loft that I just showed you, the remaining actions, which are markets and construction sites, are the main ways you get to place these stars out. So listen up so you'll know how to win the game. All 4 factions have an artifact market, and as their names suggest, it's a place where you can spend your artifacts. All 4 of these work the same. You either pay any 3 artifact cards or play a pair of 2 matching artifact cards to take this action. Your reward is that you get to place an authority token here and gain 1 allegiance with that faction. So since I placed my worker at the Free Press of Harsh Reality because I thought this teddy bear was too adorable to pass up, I could use any 3 artifact cards, but since I have a pair of broken glasses, I can use these 2 cards. I place them in the discard pile, take 1 star authority token from my player mat and place it here, and increase the Subterran Allegiance track. And the final action spaces are these construction sites. Each of these has 4 of these one-time use action spaces that dice cannot be bumped out of. You can pick any of the 4 that don't have a worker and place a worker there by paying the cost printed on that space. So in this construction site, I could either pay clay or gold. I'll spend a gold and take this spot. These construction sites are a collaborative effort, and they become complete once a certain number of action spaces are filled in depending on your player count. These charts to the left remind you of this number. So in a 2 to 3 player game, once 2 of the spaces are filled, the construction is complete. If you have 4 players, 3 spaces need to be filled, and it's all 4 spaces for a 5 to 6 player game. So because I'm playing a 3-player game, since this die was just placed and there are 2 spots filled, the construction is over. I immediately flip the market tile over and slide it down, bumping the workers who built it off of their spaces. All players who contributed at least 1 worker to this project gets to place an authority marker on the market and immediately takes their workers back, rolling them, adding them to their worker pool, and doing a knowledge check as always. You get the drill by now. Whenever a construction project is completed, this introduces a new market to the game and thus another action space for players to utilize. These work just like the artifact markets, except each has its own unique cost as depicted on the tile. For example, to place a worker at this lottery of diminishing returns, I would need to discard this specific artifact card, which looks strangely like a board game I think I'd really enjoy playing, as well as 1 food and 1 bliss. In return, I would increase the Wastelander's allegiance and also get to place a star on this market. Placing authority tokens on these markets is not only helpful to win, but it also has another effect. Every one of these market tiles pictures an ongoing negative effect for any player who doesn't have at least 1 authority on it, such as this Courthouse of Hasty Judgment that doesn't allow you to use pairs of artifacts at artifact markets, or the Bureau of Restricted Tourism that won't let you place a worker if you already have at least 2 on the board. There's a wide range of negative effects spread across these tiles, which will change each game depending on which markets are randomly placed out. And it's important to know that at any of these locations, there's no limit to the number of authority tokens each player can have there. And that's it. Those are all of the actions. We went over quite a bit, but there's a lot of overlap and the iconography is incredibly clear. So once you get going, it's pretty smooth sailing. We're in the home stretch of this Rip Up the Rules video, but I need to quickly circle back to the allegiance tracks to show you the impacts these have on gameplay. Each of these allegiance tracks have bonuses, signified by these illustrations surrounded by the white border, and they're unlocked when the progress marker reaches it. An important note about these bonuses: they are only available to players who have an active, that means face up, recruit in that faction. If you do, you get it. If not, the bonus has no impact on you. The first tier bonus is the same for all 4 factions. When you visit that faction's commodity area, you always get 1 extra of that commodity. You can place a faction marker there to make sure that you don't forget. The second tier is the same for all 3 of the bottom factions. Whenever you use the mine, instead of choosing one of the 2 benefits to gain, for example this stone or artifact card, you instead get both benefits. Again, place a faction token there to remember. Since the Icarites don't have a tunnel, their benefit is instead that whenever you place an authority token anywhere in Icarite territory, you gain a free artifact card. The third tier bonus on all the tracks is just like the effect we saw earlier on the mining track. Any players with a hidden recruit of that faction immediately flip them face up. And at this final space of the allegiance track, all players with any recruits from that faction get to place an authority token on that recruit. Remember that these bonuses only apply to players with recruits from that faction. And also you should know that the benefits are cumulative, so even when the progress marker advances to tier 2 and beyond that, tier 1 benefits stay in effect, and so on. There are many different recruit cards to explore in this game, and besides interacting with the allegiance track of their faction, they each have their own ongoing effect that will help you throughout the game. These recruits with a black background behind their name, however, do not belong to any faction, so they won't interact with any of the allegiance tracks, but in exchange, they come with stronger abilities printed on the card. And that completely covers the first option you can take on your turn, place a worker, and all the effects that will happen as a result. And don't worry, the other option to retrieve workers is super simple. Instead of placing a worker, you can choose to retrieve any number of your workers from the board, but it has to be at least 1. And you can leave any behind, which will typically mainly be the ones that you have sent to construction sites. You also can't retrieve workers from the runaway worker space. The only way to get those back is through the lost and found. Take the workers you retrieved, and are you ready for me to say it one last time? Roll them, add them to your available workers pool, and do a knowledge check. Additionally, this key at the top of the board, besides reminding you about the cost of placing additional matching workers, also reminds you that there's a cost to retrieving workers. You either pay 1 food or 1 bliss and gain 2 morale, or you simply have to lose 1 morale if you have any available to lose. And that's a turn. Either place a worker on the board triggering an action, or retrieve your workers. Once you take one of those 2 actions and complete your turn, the player to your left does the same. Play continues like this around the table in clockwise order until a player eventually places the 9th and final star-shaped authority token from their player mat onto the board. Once that happens, every player, including the player that placed that 9th star, gets 1 more turn and then the game ends. Remember that you do have a 10th authority token off to the side of your player mat. If you've already placed 9 stars, you can additionally use this 10th star if you're able to. Once all players have had their final turn, the game ends and the player who placed the most stars is the winner and emerges as the leader of the new and hopefully freer world. If there's a tie, the player with the higher morale wins. If there's still a tie, the player with the lowest knowledge wins. And if there's still a tie, things ended up being even more harmonious than you could have anticipated, and the tied players share the victory. And that's Euphoria Essential Edition with no rulebook required. The game also comes with a fantastic Automa mode that uses this guide and these components, which must be used in a solo game and can optionally be used in a 2-player game. I hope you have a blast playing through this dystopian adventure and that this video helps you dive right in. If anything is unclear and you have a question, or you just want to chat about this game or any others, drop a comment below or message me on any of my social media platforms and you'll hear right back from me. I've linked the Board Game Geek page for Euphoria in the description below, as well as the Stonemaier website where you can go to learn even more about this game. Thanks so much for watching. I hope that the rest of your day is euphoric.